Good evening, and welcome to the Obscura Institute. The lamps are lit, the archive is open, and tonight we draw a single file down from the shelves. File 1. The Mary Celeste, the ship found sailing herself in the open Atlantic, sound and seaworthy. Her crew vanished without a trace. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let us begin. In the first week of November 1872, on a wharf in New York, a young boy named Arthur Briggs watched his family make ready to sail. His father was the captain of the ship. His mother and his baby sister were going aboard for the voyage. Arthur was staying behind to keep up with his schooling, and so he waved them off from the dock and went back to his lessons. He had no way of knowing it was the last time he would see any of them. The ship that carried them out of the harbor was a brigantine, a two-masted sailing ship, square-rigged at the front and fore and aft behind, built in 1861 at Spencer's Island on the Nova Scotia coast. Her builder was a man named Joshua Dewis, and when she first slid into the water, she carried a different name. She was the Amazon. Just under 100 feet long, modest, useful, the sort of working vessel that crossed the Atlantic, carrying whatever needed carrying. Her early life was not lucky. In 1867, she was wrecked off Cape Breton, then salvaged, sold, and registered again at New York the following year. It was then that she was given the name we remember, Mary Celeste. After a rebuild in 1872, she was larger than before, a little over 100 feet, with 2 decks now instead of 1, and a registered weight of around 280 tons. A renamed, rebuilt ship. Sailors have always had quiet feelings about renamed ships, though it was never more than superstition. In the autumn of 1872, she was in New York, loading cargo for Genoa, in Italy. The cargo was alcohol. Industrial alcohol, the kind used in manufacturing rather than drinking, listed in the records as denatured, though there is some old ambiguity in the paperwork about exactly how it was classified. 1,701 barrels of it packed into the hold, worth somewhere near $37,000 at the time. A serious cargo, securely stowed. Her master was Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was born in April of 1835, which made him 37 that year. By every account, an experienced and careful seaman, sober in habit, well regarded. He had handpicked his crew of 7. These were not strangers thrown together at the dock. He chose them. His wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda, came aboard for the crossing. Arthur, the young son who had waved them off, stayed behind in New York with his grandmother, his schooling to attend to. A man does not bring his wife and his small daughter onto a ship he expects to be dangerous. He brings them because he expects an ordinary crossing and a safe arrival. The presence of that little girl on board tells us something about what Briggs believed the voyage would be. On the 7th of November, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor, bound east across the Atlantic for Genoa. 10 people aboard. The captain, his wife, their daughter, and 8 crew, though some accounts count the working crew as 7 under Briggs. A routine trade run in a sound ship under a good captain in the busy shipping season. That is the last clear picture we have of them as living people, setting out on a journey they had every reason to expect to complete. Nearly a month later, on the afternoon of the 4th of December, another ship was crossing the same waters. She was the Dei Gratia, a British brig under Captain David Morehouse. She was out in the Atlantic, east of the Azores, that scattering of islands belonging to Portugal, sitting alone in the ocean some 900 miles west of the mainland. Open water, a long way from any coast. Morehouse, as it happened, was no stranger to Benjamin Briggs. The two men were acquainted, and they had dined together in New York not long before either ship set out. That small fact would later feed the first suspicions when people began to ask how one captain came to find the other's ship adrift. Here, we should pause on a small confusion in the record because it matters for getting the story straight. You will see the discovery dated to both the 4th and the 5th of December. The reason is simple, and it is not sinister. In the old nautical reckoning of time, a ship's day began at noon, not at midnight. So an event on the afternoon of the 4th, by the calendar on land, was logged by the ship as falling on the 5th. Both dates are correct. They are just two ways of counting the same afternoon. What Morehouse's men saw was a sailing ship in the distance, moving strangely. She was under sail, but she was not holding a steady course. She yawed and wandered, the way a vessel does when no hand is on the wheel. They watched her. They signaled to her. Nothing came back. No flag, no answering signal, no figure at the rail. So Morehouse sent a boarding party across the water to climb aboard and see what was wrong. What they found has kept people talking for more than 150 years. The ship was the Mary Celeste, and she was empty, not wrecked, not burning, not listing badly or breaking apart. Empty. Every person who had sailed from New York, Briggs, his wife, his little daughter and all his crew, was gone. The deck was bare. The cabins were quiet. The ship sailed on beneath her own canvas with no one aboard to guide her. The boarding party walked through a vessel that, by most measures, was perfectly able to continue her voyage. And there was no one to ask what had happened. The men from the Dei Gratia went through the ship carefully, and later the courts went through it again. What they recorded is the heart of the mystery, not damage, but order. It was the ordinariness of what they found that unsettled people. Below the waterline, in the bilge, the lowest part of the hull, there was water, about 3.5 feet of it. That sounds alarming until you understand the scale. For a ship of that size, it was not enough to sink her and not enough to stop her sailing. It was water a working pump could handle. It was not a flooding ship. Above that, things were strangely intact. The cargo of alcohol was still in the hold, largely undisturbed, all those barrels still stowed. The ship had food and fresh water enough to last 6 months. The galley held provisions. The crew's personal belongings were still in their berths, clothing, possessions, the ordinary things sailors carry, not gathered up, not ransacked, left as if their owners meant to come back to them. And here we come to a detail that has stayed with everyone who hears it, though we must be honest about where it comes from. In the retellings that made the case famous, the mate's cabin is described with a file of sewing machine oil standing upright on a small bracket in its proper position. Near it, popular accounts long described a reel of cotton thread and a thimble, a small bottle of oil standing straight up on a shelf. If that ship had been through violent weather, the kind of seas that might sweep people overboard, that little bottle would have been thrown down. The thread and the thimble would have rolled away. Instead, they sat in place, neat and undisturbed. It is a haunting picture, but it belongs to the legend more than to the inquiry's records. Still, it captures the unsettling idea that whatever happened on that ship, it does not look as though it happened in a storm so violent it tossed the cabins about. A few charts had been scattered below deck. That is the closest thing to disorder anyone recorded. The rest was tidy, but some things were missing, and this is where the puzzle sharpens. The ship's only lifeboat was gone. The navigational instruments were gone with it. The sextant, which a captain uses to find his position by the sun and stars, and the chronometer, the precise clock used to work out longitude. These were the very tools a man would take if he meant to find his way somewhere across open water. Most of the ship's papers were gone too, but not all of them. The captain's logbook remained, and it was the log that gave the last thread of the timeline. Its final entry was dated the 25th of November at 5 in the morning. In it, the ship recorded that she had come within sight of the Azores. The log noted that the crossing had brought rough seas over about 2 weeks. And then it stopped. There is a gap to hold on to here. The last entry was the 25th of November. The Dei Gratia found her on the 4th of December. Somewhere in those 9 or 10 days, in waters that the ship had nearly crossed, 10 people left a sound vessel and were never seen again, and they took the lifeboat, the instruments, and most of the papers, but left the food, the cargo, and their clothes behind. The Mary Celeste was sailed to Gibraltar, and there the British Vice Admiralty Court opened an inquiry. The court's first concern was a hard, practical one. Had there been a crime? Because abandonment is one thing, but 10 people do not usually vanish without someone wanting to know whether they were helped to vanish. There was, at first, suspicion. Much of it came from the Attorney General at Gibraltar, a man named Frederick Solly Flood, whose deep mistrust of the whole affair shaped its early months. Stains were noticed on one of the ship's rails and on a sword found in the captain's cabin, and the question was asked whether they might be blood. The stains were examined. They were not blood. That line of suspicion led nowhere. The inquiry ran for 3 months. In the end, it found no evidence of foul play, no evidence of violence, no evidence that anyone aboard had harmed anyone else. The salvage crew of the Dei Gratia were eventually paid a reward for bringing the ship in, though a strikingly small one. The salvage award was set at around $8,300, about £1,700, and that sum was itself only a small fraction of the roughly $46,000 at which the ship and her cargo were insured. A remarkably small reward, given the suspicion that had hung over Morehouse and his crew that they might somehow have engineered the whole thing. That suspicion was never supported by anything the court could find. So the inquiry settled on the least dramatic explanation available, that the crew had, for some reason, abandoned the ship in a hurry. They had got into the lifeboat and left. Why an experienced captain would do such a thing was the question, and the favoured answer pointed to the cargo. Perhaps the barrels of alcohol had begun to leak. Perhaps fumes had built up in the hold, and Briggs, fearing an explosion, had ordered everyone into the boat as a precaution, meaning to wait at a safe distance until the danger passed. It is a reasonable idea, but it does not close the case, and the gaps in it are easy to see. Why would a careful captain abandon a seaworthy ship, one still under sail, still floating, with 6 months of provisions aboard, over a fear that might pass? Why was there no distress signal of any kind reported? And why were some of the ship's documents taken and others left behind in a pattern that seems neither like full panic nor like calm preparation? A man fleeing for his life does not always stop to gather the right papers. A man leaving in good order does not usually leave his logbook. The first theory explained the empty ship. It did not explain the details. In the years that followed, people went back over the evidence again and again, and the closer they looked, the more the tidy version came apart. Take the physical state of the ship. The hatches over the cargo hold had not been forced. The cargo itself was largely in place, and the davits showed nothing dramatic. The davits are the small cranes a ship uses to lower a lifeboat. They did not carry the clear marks you might expect from a boat torn away in a desperate rush. There was one more thing as well. The main halyard, a heavy rope about 3 inches around, was found broken and hanging over the side of the ship. From that broken rope, one careful and rather sad reconstruction has been built. It goes like this. Suppose Briggs did decide to leave the ship temporarily, out of fear of those alcohol fumes perhaps, or because a faulty instrument made him believe the ship was taking on more water than she truly was. He gathers his family and crew into the lifeboat. He takes the instruments and the papers, the sensible things to carry. And rather than cast off entirely, he ties the lifeboat to the ship with that strong halyard rope, so the boat can trail safely behind while they wait and watch to see whether the ship is really in danger. And then the rope breaks. A gust, a swell, a sudden strain, and the line that joined the little boat to the big ship parts. The Mary Celeste, still carrying her sails, catches the wind and pulls away. The lifeboat, with 10 people in it, cannot catch her. They are left in an open boat in the deep Atlantic, watching their ship sail off without them, and the sea does the rest. It is a plausible chain of events. It uses the broken halyard, the missing boat, the missing instruments, the fear of explosion. But notice, it is a reconstruction. It is a story built to fit the clues, not a record of what happened. No one survived to confirm a word of it, and there were always other ideas competing for the same evidence. Some pointed to the ship's compass, suggesting a fault or a sudden swing in its reading that might have convinced the captain he was somewhere he was not, or sailing into danger. Some suspected sabotage. Some reached for piracy, but pirates do not leave a valuable cargo and the crew's belongings untouched. Some suspected mutiny, but the inquiry found no sign of violence. And some imagined a waterspout, a whirling column of wind and water at sea, sweeping suddenly across the deck, frightening the crew into the boat, or even briefly making the ship seem to be foundering. Each theory could explain part of it. None of them could explain all of it. The waterspout might explain panic, but not the strange tidiness of the cabins below. Piracy might explain missing people, but not the intact cargo. The alcohol fumes might explain the captain's fear, but not why a temporary precaution became a permanent loss. Unless you add the broken rope, and the broken rope adds a death you can only guess at. That is the trouble with all of it. There is no shortage of evidence. There is only a shortage of an explanation that the evidence does not contradict. There is one kind of evidence that might have settled a great deal, and it never came. No bodies were ever recovered. Not one. No wreckage of the lifeboat washed ashore that could be tied to the Mary Celeste with any certainty. No bones, no clothing, no fragment of the boat that carried 10 people away. It was not for lack of looking. The disappearance was widely known. Ships were questioned. Ports around maritime Europe were canvassed for any word. Notices were posted. If Briggs and his family and his crew had come ashore somewhere, or been picked up by a passing vessel, or if their boat had drifted to any coast, there was every chance of word reaching back. The shipping world was large, but it was connected. Sailors talked, and a story like this traveled. Nothing credible ever came. No reliable sighting of any of them, alive or dead, was ever authenticated. Over the years, there were claims, there always are, in a case this famous, confessions and tales from men who said they knew what had happened or who claimed to have been aboard. None of them held up, and none could be confirmed. They tell us more about the people who told them than about the Mary Celeste. Among the few traces Sarah Briggs left behind were the letters she had written to her husband's mother before sailing. They survive still, and in them she sounds happy, looking forward to the crossing, untroubled by any thought of danger. Sarah and her little daughter Sophia, 2 years old, were never found. Captain Briggs was never found. His hand-picked crew of 7 were never found. 10 people stepped off the edge of the record on a December day in 1872, and the ocean gave nothing back. The ship, by contrast, sailed on for years. She passed through a string of owners, none of whom prospered greatly by her. She carried the reputation of an unlucky vessel wherever she went. Her end, when it came, was squalid and entirely human. In 1885, her final captain, a man named Gilman Parker, deliberately ran her onto a reef off the coast of Haiti in an attempt to claim the insurance. He was later brought to trial for the fraud, though accounts of how the case ended differ. Even her destruction was someone else's scheme. Whatever she had once witnessed, she carried no answer to it down onto that reef. So we are left with one of the strange facts of this whole affair. The Mary Celeste is among the most thoroughly documented disappearances in the history of the sea, and among the least explained. We are not short of information. We know the ship, down to her measurements and her renaming. We know the captain, his age, his reputation, the names of his wife and daughter, the son he left at home with his school books. We have the cargo manifest, the date she sailed, the last line of her log, and the hour it was written. We have an inventory of what was aboard and what was missing. We have a 3-month court inquiry and more than a century and a half of careful study since. And still, with all of that, no one can tell you what happened to the 10 people who left her. We can say what did not happen more confidently than what did. There is no good evidence of piracy, no evidence of mutiny, no evidence of murder, no evidence of a storm violent enough to match the strange tidiness below deck. We can offer the reconstructions, the leaking alcohol, the lifeboat tied behind, the rope that broke, and they may even be close to the truth. But may be close is as far as the evidence will carry us. And so the last word belongs not to the ship, but to a boy on a dock. Arthur Briggs was a young boy when he waved his family out of New York Harbor. He stayed with his grandmother, kept up with his school books, and grew into a man who never learned what had become of his mother, his father, and his baby sister. The ship was found. The story was studied for the rest of his life and long after. But the one answer he must have wanted never came, and he lived out his days without it. And there, for now, File 1 must rest. Some questions are never fully answered, and perhaps that is exactly what keeps us returning to them. Thank you for spending this quiet hour in the archive. The lamps will stay lit, and the Institute will be here whenever you wish to return. Until then, rest well.